You're ready to go.
Okay guys, and welcome to the very first installment of the webinar series for leadership, and this subject is for Diploma of Management students. By the end of this session, we'll be taking you through the very first two learning activities. The first one is setting them up for success. The second one is unlocking the potential of your team. By the end of this session, you'll have all of the information that you need to be able to understand the material and be able to put your answers into those first two learning activities. Just to let everybody know what we've done, we've made a few changes to the webinar series, I guess if you like. So instead of having, we're basically just shortened format a little bit. We have broken down our resource sessions, so the learning activities, to two sessions. So you'll see now advertised there'll be a resource part 1 and a resource part 2. This is effectively the resource session part 1 for leadership. And next week in the same time slot we'll be running the part 2 session. The following week we'll be taking you through the actual assessment parts, all of them. So effectively we're going to be knocking off all 3 of our webinars or the whole subject in 3 sessions, and that'll be completed effectively in 2 weeks from tonight. For those that are tuning in later or in the room right now, if you have a look on the screen, right now we're actually looking at Alyssa's screen. Alyssa, if you just show the guys on the right hand side, we actually have a listing of upcoming webinars as well as previous webinars. Now for this subject there isn't any videos there, but normally if there are any videos we'll actually post them there, so keep an eye out. If you've missed this session and you're watching it later, you'll obviously see that that is now available to you, the little YouTube link underneath. But if ever you want to see where the links to upcoming webinars are, just go to the subject of your choice, or any subject. Any subject will actually list all of the upcoming webinars. If you're wanting to see the videos for a particular subject, you need to navigate to that particular subject and then have a look on the right-hand side where Alyssa's mouse is sort of hovering at the moment. Yep, there it is, and that's where you're going to find all the information about your webinars. So without further ado, we're going to get stuck into the very, very first learning activity this evening at 8 minutes past 6 on Tuesday, February the 24th. Full steam of full head of Wi-Fi and battery. Let's get this puppy underway.
Just checking because it's very important. All right, I'm just loading that up in now. Okay, great. Okay. So hopefully...
Now leadership.
Yeah, so absolutely. So hoping everybody can see my screen right about now.
I can see your screen. It looks wonderful.
Excellent. All right, so...
Very nice, very nice.
Very nice.
So just to let everybody know, I guess a bit of a background with this subject, it's previously known as Managed People Performance, or the unit of competence that it relates to is Managed People Performance. That's the official longer version or the actual official title of the subject, if you like, which is shortened to the word leadership. And as we progress through the subject, you'll sort of see how elements of leadership practice are very, very much intertwined in the management of people performance. We'll be getting a bit of we'll be talking a little bit about that as we go. So I guess we can just start with the very, very first batch of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. There are 7 questions, obviously, in this very first learning activity. And we'll start right off the bat with that very first one, which is really just give an example of a strategy you might use, to provide support to a new employee. Okay?
Yep.
So I guess the key concepts there is any support or any strategy that you might have when a new employee might join an organisation. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess just to give the guys a bit of an overview, this subject really starts with, that point of view that you're bringing somebody in from the first day into your organisation. You've got a new employee, you're bringing them in. So this is really the first set of questions that are titled Setting Them Up for Success. Really just talks about that initial stage because it's such an important thing, and we'll start talking about that a little bit as we go. But that very, very first initial stage when you bring somebody into the business is extremely important, and it's one of the ways that we can help to manage somebody's individual performance, and that's why we start with that initial, I guess, induction or onboarding process that we'll talk about.
Definitely.
But just to give you a bit of a heads up as to if you're wondering why the questions are linked to these sorts of areas, that's, I guess, part of the flow of it. It just looks at what happens when you bring somebody in. So there is a little bit of crossover in the material that talks about staff recruitment and induction. Now, you guys are management students. There is a subject out there called staff recruitment. It's not a subject that you guys do, let's say. Instead, you guys have this subject, which is leadership. It's all about managing performance, which I personally much prefer. So I think that what we've actually done for you, we've included some elements of induction and staff recruitment in the learning materials for you. So if you're going through the materials and you're a bit confused, there's a lot of info, or this at the start it gives you a lot of information about staff recruitment and things like that, and recruitment techniques and how to bring people into the business. And really the conversations that we have sort of go from here, from when you basically bring somebody into the business, and that's the conversations that we're going to have. We do include the learning materials though for you on some of the other concepts, just so that you're aware of them, because it just creates a bit of synergy. But if anyone's confused about that, don't be. It's just there for you for that reason. Sorry, you started answering the first question and I've jumped in. I apologise.
Okay, so I guess obviously based on what you did mention before there, Adam, it really does kind of cross over into a few different units. So what we're looking for that very first question is just an example of a strategy you might use to provide support to a new employee. So you've got a new employee that might start your organisation. What are some things or some documents, or what's something that you could provide them with that allows them to feel supported, I guess, in terms of knowing what their expectations are within the organisation? What are some things you could do to be able to give them the support they need to know what's expected of them? You only really need to give us one example of a strategy. If I talk too much, I'll probably go into a few answers, but because we're only looking for just one example, yeah. I mean, I think it's really important that if you've got a new employee that you do have a series of standards and a series of expectations that they are aware of. So things like codes of conduct, things like training. I think they're all strategies used and that are essential to supporting the new induction process for a new employee. So you could probably elaborate on a couple of those, or perhaps suggest something additional if you have any ideas that you might specifically like to kind of review.
One way of answering this question, outside of going to the learning materials, of course, we want you to have a look at the materials there. But one way of answering is just to consider what it's like when you're a brand new person walking into a business for the very, very first time. You know, remember what it's like when you start a brand new job, and the night before you're thinking you have all these questions, you don't know what are the people going to be like, you know, what am I going to be doing on the first day, what if I don't know how to do this, that or the other. There's plenty of things that you might be thinking about before you walk in the door for the first time. And really, if you put yourself in that mindset, you'll start thinking about some of the things that you might want to do to assist somebody as they're walking through the door the first time.
Yeah.
I guess what you'll notice through the actual materials is that there's a whole concept called onboarding. And just to really take it straight out of the materials, onboarding effectively is the process of helping new employees become productive members of a company. And so onboarding process is really designed to welcome and educate new employees to a business. That's what we refer to when we talk about onboarding. So onboarding is an incredibly important part of bringing somebody new into the business, and the onboarding process usually involves a whole range of different things. Now, if I go through those different things, we're giving you effectively some of your answers here, but have a look at some of the information there on onboarding when you're going through the learning materials, as for looking for some strategies that you might want to engage in or to provide to support a new employee. So I guess just to extend on that a little bit, and the reason why we have onboarding processes, and look, I think I'll just sort of generically say what some of these things are. The guys that can read up a little bit further, but the onboarding process usually just includes things like getting the paperwork organised for somebody, orientation, so welcoming somebody to the business and showing them around the building and what have you, socialisation, so it also includes introducing people to key people that they need to know in the business. Probably the most important thing, generally speaking, in sort of medium to large businesses anyway, as part of the onboarding process, is the induction program. So quite often you have an actual program which is there to induct people in. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes it's 2, sometimes 3, sometimes even 4. I've actually been involved in 4-week induction programs before. And just depending on how much information is required to do that job. So Sorry, somebody's saying that I've got audio problems here. Is that a bit better now? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you good. You're breaking up just a little bit, but not so much, not so bad. So you seem to be okay now, Adam.
Okay, sounds good. So really that's what we're talking about when we're talking about onboarding. It's really getting somebody from a brand new member who walks in the door from the first time to a productive member at the end of it. That's everything that happens in that phase, usually sort of a 2-3 month sort of period. That's what we call our onboarding process. Now, a couple of reasons, I guess, for an onboarding, I guess the reasons that companies engage in an onboarding program is that it actually reduces a lot of cost for the business in many ways because generally speaking your retention rates are much better. You're more likely to keep members if you have a really nice onboarding process. If you have an onboarding process which isn't so warming and welcoming and lovely, you're generally speaking you're going to find that your retention rates are much lower. Also, an interesting thing is that new employees pretty much decide whether they feel at home in the first couple of weeks in a new company. And so generally speaking, that first impression is everything. Most employees will know whether this is a place they want to be long term after a very, very short few weeks, which is actually quite interesting. So how you manage that first couple of weeks is absolutely essential. There is a statistic that's part of the learning material that actually says new employees that went through a structured program, onboarding program, were 58% more likely to stay within the organisation 3 years later. So to have a long-term, to be a long-term employee, much higher chance if they had a structured welcome party, if you like. And interestingly as well, 22% of staff turnover, so a big chunk of turnover of staff happens within the first 6 weeks. So you want to get that first 6 weeks pretty much as good as you can to sort of do that. So they're all kind of reasons why you would sort of have a program, an onboarding program. So what we want you guys to do is just give us something that you're going to find, an example of something that you might include as part of your onboarding program, which might help to support a new employee, and then we're happy.
Is code of behaviour manuals included in that?
Yeah, without a doubt, absolutely. So those sorts of, usually in a part of an induction program, or could be separated to that, all of those expectations are provided, especially those that have any sort of legal connotations to them or anything like that. They're absolutely provided. So 100%. Yep. Now, are we happy to roll on to the next question, Alyssa?
Yeah, I think yeah, we should probably move on if you are good to go. Obviously, look, I'm almost inclined to do question 3 before we do question 2 because it kind of follows on from what you've just been mentioning. But
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so question 3 basically says write a list of the documentation that you would provide to an employee on their first day. So you've obviously been speaking a lot about the onboarding process and what's involved and the importance and the benefits, and statistically, obviously it does lead to retention, which is awesome. There obviously are a series of documents that also need to be provided. Stephen, you raised a good couple there where you were talking about things like the code of conduct and, things like standards or, contracts or job descriptions. All those types of documentation are key and need to be given to the employee on their first day or in the beginning part of their employment, so that they are aware of what is required of them. I guess in terms of the amount of documentation that we're looking for, because it doesn't specify what or how many types of documents we're looking for, I would probably be inclined to say maybe about 5 different types of documents there, Adam.
I would say that's probably about right. Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yep, absolutely. And you've really identified, documentation is key. You've got to provide your new employees with as much information as you can about the organisation. So it really is essential to be able to identify what that documentation is, especially in that onboarding process. The more information, the more exposure that the new employee has, the more likely they are to feel supported and to be able to or want to stay with you.
Do you want to provide one example for the guys? Listen, I'll provide one too.
Yeah, look, I think one of the pieces of documentations I think a key one would definitely be a code of conduct. That would be a massive piece of documentation that I would be extremely keen to have my newbies have on the very first day.
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good.
Yep.
I'm happy with that. That was a really good call there by Stephen earlier, so thanks, Stephen. And yeah, I mean, it could be as something as the actual fire evacuation procedure.
Yep, absolutely.
So the guys are starting on day one. We want them to be aware that if everybody races and runs out the building, that they know where to race and run out to as well. They're an employee of ours now. We've got to take care of them, like take care of everybody. So it might be something that you do, your security policy, something like that. So think outside the square a little bit. There are a couple of obvious ones, obviously, in relation to somebody's employment. But yeah, have a think about some other things that you just might give to the guys. We're happy if you just give us I think 5 or 6 items that you might want to provide to the guys for when they start on their first day. Yep, and just listen, so don't explain them. We don't want to know what the code of conduct form is.
No.
We just want you to list it.
Yep, just list them.
Yeah.
Make it nice and easy for yourself.
Absolutely.
So obviously doing a little bit of a jumpy then, I think maybe just we'll head back to question 2. I just actually thought question 1 and question 3, seeing you spoke about induction, kind of gelled quite nicely.
Alyssa, can you please mute the microphones of the guys in the room? Sorry, there's just a loop happening again. Thanks.
All right, can you hear us now?
Guys from the live feed, if you'd like to join the conversation, of course, you're more than welcome to. Just let us know in the chat window and we'll unmute you. Just it should actually help the audio problems there, Saffron, as well.
Okay.
I hope it's a bit better.
All right. Lovely.
Cool.
So back to question 2.
Yeah, again, I find this question is probably worded not the best because it says describe the process of employee probation.
Yeah.
And usually when we're talking about process, we're talking about like a step-by-step. So do this first, do this second, do this third. Now, if the guys want to give us a step-by-step breakdown of what they're going to be doing in a probationary period, beautiful. I would be extremely happy to see that.
Yep.
That's actually more than what we're actually asking for here. Really what we're looking for is just explain, the importance of an employee probation. So just explain what an employee or why we have an employee probation and why it's important. Really, if we can hear that you understand what a probation is and why it's there, and I guess the importance of it, we're happy. The question, it says, again, process. So for me, reading the question like that, it sort of sounds like we want you just to give us a flow chart and a step-by-step breakdown of how it's done. Really, we just want you just to describe the importance and why we have it. Alyssa, how do you feel about this question and what are you expecting?
I definitely agree, and I also think it's really important to address the importance of probation from both the employer and the employee perspective as well.
Very good.
What we want to do is we always talk about the importance of probation from an employer perspective, but think about the benefits that it also has for the employee as well. So look at those both perspectives, because it's there for employee, it's there for the employer, and it's quite a beneficial tool. So I'm a bit of a fan. I would like to see both aspects come into that response.
Have you ever experienced anything like that yourself, Alyssa? You've been in a probationary period and you've used that period to assess your situation, or have you found benefit of having a probation period through your own experience?
Absolutely, and I've employed people that perhaps we've obviously always had probationary periods attached as per award regulation. And people have just found that perhaps a couple of weeks into joining the organisation that they're just not right for the organisation. And there's no hard feelings. They'll come to us, they'll let us know that perhaps they're not the right fit, that it wasn't what they've expected. There's no penalties, there's no issues. they're still in the probationary period, so it's okay.
Mm.
And from an employer perspective as well, perhaps there's a bit more flexibility in terms of working out whether or not these people are right for the job through observation and through having them perform certain tasks in the workplace. So there is a bit of a benefit there, and from a legal perspective, there's also a bit of a benefit of having employee probationary periods. But I'm a big fan of really embracing them, and really as an organisation really using it to decide whether or not those people are right for your business, but also making sure that the employee knows that if they're not right for the business, it's okay.
Yeah. And look, it's interesting because the management students don't have the actual induction and recruitment subject that the business students do, which is fine. But this whole discussion is actually a really important one. We talk about work culture and workplace culture, and we talk about when and it's really important for the guys when they're considering applying for jobs going forward. Really, the way I like to sort of explain it as a business is when they're bringing new people into the business, they generally want to know a couple of things. They want to know, firstly, can you do the job, which is usually pretty obvious by your resume. Somebody can look at your resume without speaking to you and know if you can, do the job. Will you do the job comes down to what your motivation is for working there, which is a really tough one to see in a resume. It's hard to know what somebody's individual motivation for wanting to work there is. But the third thing that organisations want to know when they bring people into a business early on is, will they fit in? And it's a really interesting thing. That's generally the third sort of tick that needs to go against somebody's name when they're being interviewed or looked at as a potential candidate. They want to know, are they going to fit into the culture that exists? And that is one thing that's kind of hard to sort of tell in an interview. It takes a period of time to see how somebody manages to fit in, how they socialise with others around. I mean, if you're a business owner and you employ, say, 50 people, and these guys come, they love their work, they put their heart, they put their soul into everything they do, you've got great systems, you've got great communication, you've got great leadership, you've got just a great environment to work in, the last thing you want to do is bring somebody into that fold that is likely to, just change the culture or change the way that people work and they interact with each other and things like that. So that's part of the reason why I guess a period like that exists from the benefit of the employer, but same for the employee, because you really don't know how an organisation's culture is until you embed yourself in it. I can tell you that I had experience working in advertising sales before, and it's not for that sort of environment is not for the faint-hearted. Let me tell you, it's a work hard, play hard sort of environment. So, part of the culture of that environment is, and this is how it is, but it's part of the culture of that sort of environment, those rock and roll sort of sales environments are, going out and getting drunk with your manager after work and things like that, which is, it seems like a weird thing to sort of say, but they're what we call, work really hard. They're work hard environments, but then they're play hard environments as well. You have to put on this sort of face, and it's not for everybody. You may not want to go off and be drinking, long lunches that have alcohol involved and things like that. That might not be your scene, and that's something that you have the absolute right to make that decision on as far as your environment goes. So that's something that you'll only know once you're sort of in there, I guess, and that's part of the reasoning, I guess, on both sides of the coin for having that probationary period. Let's keep rolling along. Sorry, I'm just rattling on here.
Work hard, play hard.
Do you like that? Work hard, play hard?
I love it. Yep.
and play hard, did these boys play hard? Well, we were making a mint for this company, and they put on everything they could put on. It's like a false environment, though. You feel like you're being looked after really well, but at the end of the day, you feel like you're sort of selling your soul every day to get the bucks in the door, and it's just one of those environments of just, you can't do it forever. Anyway, let's
move on.
Continue. So,
yep.
Short question here. Explain how you're going to make sure that employees are sure about their roles and responsibilities. There's probably different ways you can go about doing that. Have a look at the learning material that talks about different methods of communication, different ways that a company can communicate. So you can talk about that. Just use your own nous here, use your own sort of thought process. How would you, if you walk into a business and you want to know what your roles and responsibilities are, how do you think that's going to be made aware to you? As obvious as that sounds, it might be made aware to you from the very, very start, from before you've even walked in. So maybe list down a couple of things, a couple of places that you might be aware of your roles and responsibilities. Without just say it out loud, but it might include your job description, the initial interview stage. It might include through that onboarding process that we've already talked about. But it can also be done through many other communication methods as well, which will happily allow you guys to find out and just let us know if you answer the question, you can't get it too wrong.
Yeah.
I'm happy to move on if you are, Lisa.
I'm happy. I'm happy as a happy thing. What did you say?
Happy as a happy thing.
Happy is a happy thing. Let's go on to question 5. What are some of the ways in which you ensure that development plans you create with employees meet the organisational and operational goals? Well, there's a very different question in that whole previous series of questions, I must say.
Yeah, it is. It is.
What are some of those?
Okay, so for this one, really what we're actually asking, and we've asked you this question before in planning. We talked about what are your priorities, and then we talked about what are the business priorities and are they in line. What we're asking you here is what is some way that you can make sure that when you bring somebody into the business and that you set them to task, that that it's linked to whatever the organisation and operational goals are.
Okay.
And
yeah. And we did
go for it, sorry.
We did actually talk about that. I think, yeah, you're right. In some of in one of the previous units, so planning, we were talking about the importance of identifying, workplace objectives or organisational objectives as well, and how they kind of almost trickle down through the business to therefore go through to the employees. So essentially you're assisting, everybody's assisting to be able to meet those organisational and operational goals, and they really factor into the development plans and give the employees a little bit of focus. So you definitely do see the kind of correlation between the importance of managing those personal work priorities, but also in terms of, these workplace development plans. So this is almost an extension of what we were talking about over the last few weeks, which kind of comes into play here, I think. So.
Yep. Maybe something that I'll just clear up for the guys is that you've got something called strategic goals and you've got something called operational goals.
Yep.
And let's just clear some of these definitions up because I think that might help. Typically a strategic goal is the overarching strategy of the business. And those that are involved in the strategic direction of a business are usually the upper management or the board of directors, your top line, your top line management team. And some of the strategic goals, I guess, can be things like increase market share, grow the business by whatever it might be. We want to increase share in New South Wales for some reason. Who'd want to increase share in New South Wales? I don't know. Sorry, I just had to make some reference to New South Wales.
Thanks very much. I was waiting for that. It hadn't come up yet.
No worries.
So.
Yeah, I know. It was an interesting place to put it in too. So they could be just overarching things. It could be, increased market share. Now, your operational goals are generally what the actual individual department's goals are. So what an operational goal is your department's breaking down what these overarching strategic missions are or goals are and making it specific to that department. So if the business's overarching goal is to increase market share and become the #1 player in the sunglasses game, then one of the department's goal might be to increase their sales by 20%.
Yeah.
So what they actually do is they put some numbers on it. The operational goals put numbers on it. What you guys need to do is then take those operational goals and make sure that each of those individuals that are in that department, their goals are in line with what that operational goal is. Make sense?
Yep.
Because you might have 3, 4, 5, 6 different departments. Now each of those departments need their own operational goal. If all of those goals are achieved, then that overarching strategic goal is achieved. That sort of makes sense. So the strategic goals at the top of the pyramid, operational goals at the middle of the pyramid, individual goals at the bottom of the pyramid. Now those individual goals need to be linked strongly to the operational goals, which are linked obviously to the strategic goals. So that's really what we want to, that's kind of, you can go down that track, then you kind of, if you're on the way to answering this question.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
what, just make sure that everything's in line is really what we want to know. Set targets that relate to the actual operational goals themselves. Make sure that the targets are linked. And if you talk about that, then you've got this question nailed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're probably going to keep moving on because I've got to go pretty soon. So let's keep rolling this baby on. Question number 6: describe methods that you use to gain efficiency and effectiveness of employees. Sorry, cost effectiveness of employees. That's the most important part of this. How do you set expectations and measure results? This one here is really just asking what can you do to make sure that you're reducing the costs, or that you're keeping the costs of your employees down to a minimum, that you're efficient, that you're effective. So what are some raw basic things that you can do? Now this one you might just need to answer just using your own instinct, so to speak. There may not be something as clean and clear in the materials. Have a look, but it may not just be written out in black and white, as it were. You might have to sort of interpret it a little bit. So really what we're saying is, what can you do to make sure that you're keeping your overarching costs down with regards to employees?
Yes, very interesting. It's a very interesting question again to throw into the mix. I mean, I guess maybe if we use an example, like we could say that maybe you were perhaps in a, you're working in a bar environment, and you knew that maybe Monday nights were traditionally not busy, but you continuously had 4 to 5 employees on. And maybe you weren't, you didn't have a big crowd, not as big as maybe Thursday and Friday night, but you kind of thought, I'm going to have 4 on, I'm going to have 4 on, I'm going to have 4 on. That's costing you a lot of money, and if you've not got any business, then you're not really being productive with your employees. So that could be kind of a hint as to what some of the methods you could do to be able to really look at how productive your employees might be. Sometimes we get stuck in the hope that things will get busy, and traditionally we haven't looked at trends or statistics or sales, and we know maybe that it's less likely to be busy. So we might over roster rather than under roster, and it's just going to cost you money. So just I guess think along maybe some of those lines if that helps you. But it is a very interesting question to throw into the mix.
Now the second part of that is asking how do you set expectations and measure results? Well, firstly, measuring results. We've done a lot of work already up to this point on how to measure things. So we're going to ask you again just to let us know how you plan on measuring that. But also when you set expectations, we're asking you how you're going to communicate, or how you're going to do all of that sort of stuff. So the second half of the question kind of gives you a bit of a hint as to what we want in the first half, so to speak. So I hope that's not too confusing.
No, yeah.
Use your gut. Alyssa's example was awesome, so go with that one. But just think about the question that you've just answered beforehand in terms of having that synergy. You're talking about setting goals, so there's a very, very strong link here as well. Sort of, I think I might have just said it there. Anyway, all is good.
Okay.
Let's roll on to the next one, the next set of questions. While we're loading it up, if anybody's in the live feed has any questions, you're welcome to throw some questions at us while we're loading up the next set of questions.
Okay, just, oopsie. All right. Unlocking the potential of your team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we've only got about 15-20 minutes left on this, which is an absolute shame.
Yeah.
Because I would love to talk about this for probably the next 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
In any case,
yeah.
we'll give you the short version. Yeah.
Sure. All right, there's only 5 questions obviously in this series of learning activities. So as Adam mentioned, I mean, I'm sure we could definitely go into a lot more detail. So just obviously to assist you in being able to answer these learning activities. Adam and I are obviously around if you need any additional support or you've got any debriefing or any additional ideas that you kind of come up with. So don't hesitate to pop them into an email or give us a call just to have a bit of a chat about them, because I think we both enjoy these types of topics. So that very first question, what training or coaching methods could you use during weekly performance meetings, and how can coaching help to achieve excellence in performance? Wow.
Okay, well, so the actual learning material guides give you a example, a method, a coaching method. And I'm actually kind of looking for you to actually put that in there, to be honest, because what it's actually asking is coaching methods. So, so styles of coaching, what sort of techniques, what coaching training or coaching techniques could you use during a performance meeting? Now, well, the materials give you one, and it's called GROW. It's called the GROW model. So have a look at the GROW model, G-R-O-W model. It's a simple 4-step process that helps you structure coaching and mentoring sessions. And each of the letters G-R-O-W stands for something, a separate word. So really the idea of GROW, and there's a few of them out there, models that are similar to this, is really just about, you know, getting the other person to decide and commit and work out the best path and the best course of action for themselves. And I guess my understanding of it is that they're obviously more likely to be more accountable to those actions if they are the ones that sort of set them themselves. So when we're talking about methods, coaching methods, so instead of coming and going, okay, everybody, you're on first base, you're on second base, you run over on third, you're on shortstop, you can field out in the outfield. Instead of sort of going and barking instructions to people, you're effectively letting people say what they think they should achieve and where they should go, and you know, you're more likely to get better results typically using these sorts of ideas. So I actually want to see this one. I mean, if you can come up with another method that you can use, and then the second part of the question is how can coaching help achieve excellence in performance? And just talk about why coaching is important in bringing out the best of it in a person. You can do that, that's fine. Just refer to the GROW model, give us a, just mention that. Have a look at it, please. So go and have a look at the video, you'll see it's there. Or another one of your choice, but happy if you go with the material on this one. Alyssa?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, the key term there is obviously coaching. So that second part of that question, how can coaching help to achieve excellence in performance? I think coaching is a really unique, very friendly way of increasing performance. So as Adam mentioned, have a look at that GROW model. And again, it is a nice sort of question, and it really does explore and shows you, if you get, you know, if you can kind of look at the model, it really shows you how you can really help change that performance and really help the your employees to achieve that level of excellence. So I quite like it. All right, moving on to
just to let the guy, I think we won't explore that any further. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, cool.
All right, so question 2 is explain how informal feedback contributes to better performance in an organisation. I think when we're in an organisation and we say things like formal feedback, I think sometimes formal feedback can be quite scary and maybe a little bit intimidating. But I guess when we talk about informal feedback, have a think about how informal feedback might be delivered, and I mean, I guess think about how non-threatening informal feedback might be, and how I guess it can probably be a little bit more personalised, and perhaps if it's a little bit more personalised, then you're more likely to kind of to take it in. So what we're looking for here is we're really looking for you to kind of consider that informal process and how I guess people feel if it's coming to them from an informal approach rather than more so a formal approach. I know personally that I would probably prefer that informal piece of feedback that might come from a colleague or might come from, a manager, where it's spoken, in a bit of an environment that's non-threatening and it's not documented. So I guess it makes me feel a little bit more secure and a little bit more calm and a little bit more embracing of the feedback.
Yep.
So I would bring I would think a little bit more personally on this level and how you kind of feel in terms of that informal process.
I think, for me, one of the most important parts of informal feedback is that it's immediate. It's now. So if something needs to be told to me now, that I know that I'm going to get the information when I need it, rather than getting an email 3 days later saying, hey, love to have a chat with you, just organise, and then somebody's going to bring up something from 3 days ago. You think, what? That's just, it's not really kind of realistic. So, the immediacy of that feedback is a big key to me in that. We talked about trust the other day as well. It's something that actually relates really well to building rapport. The stronger that rapport you have with somebody, the more easily that informal feedback can just roll off. It is important that you build a bit of trust before just throwing informal feedback at somebody, because you can really, get somebody offside really quickly if you don't have that trust. So just be careful when dealing with informal feedback, but it's certainly good because you can, that the immediacy is a big deal for me, and obviously you can get, what the information that you need when you need it. Happy if there's a few other answers that we'll definitely accept in that one. So whatever you'd like to put, we'd be happy. Question 3: list different ways that you can document performance in your organisation. So what you can do to answer this one is you can list a couple of formal feedback sessions that you might be running. So we just talked about informal, which is effectively just non-documented feedback sessions. What are the actual formal ones? So
in terms of documenting performance, I mean, there's definitely formal levels of documentation that can be used in an organisation. You might have things like, and I don't want to be too forceful, but things like performance appraisals, or things like like even to say written warnings or counselling or file notes that definitely document levels of performance that are quite formalised documents. So I guess in terms of that, there are different types of documents and different ways that you can be documented, but I guess it depends on the performance that you're wanting to document. So I would probably look at it from both perspectives. I'd be quite open in terms of what I would look for in response here, but just different ways that you can document performance, and understanding that performance issues or performance-related matters or performance-related things in the workplace should always be documented, no matter what.
Yep. So there is actually a sample of a document that documents documenting performance, sample of something that you can use if you're doing that. Have a look at that. It actually gives you 4 different boxes to fill in, which say areas of excellence in performance that has been demonstrated, or areas where excellence in performance has been demonstrated, performance areas that need improvement, additional items, i.e., for example, training, professional development needs, and next steps. So these are the sort of things you want to capture in that conversation, or in that coaching plan, if you like. So it's a sample sort of coaching plan that's in the materials. That's one way of documenting things. So have a look at the materials for that one.
Yep. Okay. All right. Let me just load up these last couple of questions, Adam.
Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, cool. All right, so question 4, explain how you can use effective mentoring and coaching to assist an individual experiencing poor performance.
Okay, so for me, Alyssa, what I'm looking for here is just examples of what an effective mentor and effective coach would do.
Yep.
So again, the questions are often worded a bit poorly, but really what I want to see is just, please, just explain what an effective coach or an effective mentor might do. What are some of the skills? What are some of the things
Yep.
an effective coach or mentor might be doing
Yep.
to be effective. So even my rephrased version is still pretty poor. But really that's what we're looking for there. So look, I'd really like to spend quite a bit of time on this. There's a couple of things I guess we can talk about.
Yep.
Something that I like to mention when you're giving feedback to somebody, there's something called eye language. Has anybody, Alyssa, are you familiar with the term eye language?
No, are we talking about I as in the letter I, or I as in
The letter I.
E-Y-E?
No, the letter I.
Right.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is when we're giving feedback is instead of saying you, we want you to replace the word you with the word I.
Mm.
And it changes the whole dynamic. So instead of saying, Alyssa, I think that you type too fast. Well, so I've said, instead of saying, Alyssa, you type too fast. I could say, I feel that the speed of typing should be 55 words per minute or something like that. That was a really bad example. But what we're trying to effectively achieve by using eye language is take the focus off the you and bring it onto us.
Yep.
So instead of sort of pointing the finger and saying, and judging somebody and saying, you do this or you do that or you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't be doing that, we're sort of saying, the way that I tend to get success by doing something, the way that I feel I've been really, successful, or the approach that I would take would be this. And it takes the whole you have done it wrong kind of attitude out of that conversation.
Mm.
So one thing that I like to tell people is when you're trying to give a bit of feedback, instead of putting it on them, put it on yourself. It's your feedback, so make it about you. Don't make it about them. Even though the feedback is designed to assist them, use I language. So, yeah, so I feel, in my experience, the way that I understand this, the way that I've experienced success in this area, the way that make it about yourself rather than you did this wrong, you need to improve here, you should look at that, you're not listening. And you'll find that when you're trying to communicate to somebody, they're far less defensive when you actually flip that language over and you talk about the way that you feel that you've had success.
Mm.
Because it doesn't make somebody feel small and horrible for what they've done. They don't feel like they've done something bad. Really, all you're doing is sharing your own expertise, knowledge in that environment. So it's really, it's a clever way of taking the focus off that person and making it about yourself. So we talk about I language. There's a couple of things that I guess I could talk about here. Have a look at the materials though in terms of coaching. There's a whole section on coaching.
Yeah.
One thing I would also say is seek to understand, not be understood. It's a key habit of success that Stephen Covey talks about. If when you're coaching, you go into it seeking to understand that other person, rather than going in there with okay, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to tell this person what they need to do better. If you go in with the mindset of, I really want to understand this person and really where they're coming from, you're going to be in a much better position to coach and help that person. So just frame it that way.
Yeah,
These are things that I'm just...
and I definitely think just in terms of just expanding on what you've just mentioned there before, the question is really asking you what kind of effective tools you'll use with mentoring and coaching to assist an individual experiencing poor performance. Like Adam said, sometimes people go in not understanding why the poor performance is existing in the first place. So a good coach and a good mentor will ask the right questions to work out what the actual reason for the poor performance is. And in a lot of cases as well, poor performance isn't linked to bad attitude. It could be because of some other issues that perhaps the employee might be having in their own personal space. And it's really important that when you are determining your process of dealing with poor performance, that you understand the person that's sitting in front of you and the reason for their poor performance. So a good coach and a good mentor will use, the I language, and they'll ask the right questions. So we can't ever assume that somebody has a bad attitude, therefore that's the reason why they're experiencing or they have poor performance. But it's really about understanding the individual and where they're coming from, like Adam mentioned. I can't stress that enough, because the legal ramifications of assumption in dealing with poor performance can be quite risky for the business. So that's just something I really wanted to add in there, having said, just kind of an extension of what you had said previously, Adam. So
I feel like that's probably the most important thing in coaching is the ability to ask good questions. And because, if you go in there with this mindset of I'm going to tell you what's up, then you've got it all wrong. You're going to have some serious problems. We're talking about monologue versus dialogue. You want to engage in dialogue with somebody. The way to do that is to ask questions, not to tell them things. The reality is that people know themselves better than anybody else knows them. So it doesn't matter what company, doesn't matter what industry, doesn't matter what situation, doesn't matter what coach to what person to anything. It could be an AFL coach to one of his star players, and the coach is trying to get his star player to perform. The coach could tell him all the things that he's doing wrong, or the coach could have a conversation with him and ask him where he feels he's at with things and as to what's going on in his life and how he feels about things. Because generally speaking, nobody's going to know themselves better than that person themselves, and a good coach will know that. A good coach will know that. So ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, that very last question, shall we move on? I think you and I could both talk about some of these things for days.
Yeah, look, I'd love to get into the skill of listening. I'm going to have to talk about that for a long time.
Yeah.
There's
All right,
a few of these other things that we're just touching on, but that's okay. That's all right. That's all right.
Okay, that very last question for these learning activities and for tonight would be just describe 3 important areas to focus on when holding a structured, formal counselling session.
Yeah. Okay. Again, it's the questions aren't beautiful. I want to make sure that we're management students. What we're doing here is we're understanding that there's a language of business that gets used out there. And in Australia, it's not called formal counselling sessions. We call these things performance appraisals. So it's really important that we all have the right language here. We're talking about performance appraisals. We want you to answer this question from the perspective that you are conducting a session for your staff. And we want you to think of 3 things that you will need to think about or focus on when you are delivering a performance appraisal to one of your staff members. That's what I'm looking for here.
Okay.
So, describe 3 important areas to focus on when holding a structured performance appraisal session. The 3 things that you might want to think about when you're doing that. They can just be very generalized things.
Yep.
So whether that be the frame of your mind, whether it be what you need to organise beforehand, whether some of a logistical thing that you want to make sure takes place. If you put there that you need to make sure that your mobile phone's turned off, then I'll give you double marks for that because that's awesome. But really, I mean, you want to make sure that you're giving somebody in those formal environments your utmost attention. Now that could be one of the areas that you actually list here. So that's one. Okay, there it is. So one important area might be that you're giving one of your considerations is one important area is that you want to give full and uninterrupted attention to somebody. And so one of the things you might do there is to make sure that your mobile phone's turned off, things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, obviously if we're looking at things like performance appraisals as well, I guess it's important that, you in terms of your own internal or organisational procedure when it comes to dealing with performance appraisals, that, you're focusing and you're bringing relevant materials to the actual session that can kind of verify, I guess, the information that you are delivering to that employee as well. So again, being very structured means obviously that you have to abide by the book and you have to do it consistently as per the organisational procedures as well. So another interesting question there to in that final for that final question in that learning activity.
Just look up about performance appraisals because that's all we're interested in here. This is what we're actually asking you to do is what do you need to consider. And remember, this subject's all about managing people's performance. We've talked about bringing people in. Now we're talking about we're talking about documenting their performance. We're talking about sitting down, having an official chat to them. So what we want to know from you guys is some things that you might want to consider when doing that. Now look, I would wish that there'd be a whole subject on performance appraisals because we could we could actually talk about. There's a lot of things. And you might want to consider where the location is, the time that you're doing it, how you're setting up the room. Are you sitting on the other side of the desk from the person, or are you sitting next to them and making it a little bit more inviting? But like it's got to be pleasant, but still business. It's still a business environment. So you've got to find the right balance. But we'll let you guys come up with 3 of your own. As long as we feel that they're hitting the mark, it's fine. So 3 important areas that we want you to think of, consider, focus, or deal with, or whatever word you want to use there. Just 3 really important areas that you need to consider when you're having a performance appraisal with one of your staff members, and we'll be happy with that. Alyssa, I have to go.
No drama. Yeah, if there's nobody else that has any questions this evening, we can definitely wrap up the session. I guess if there are any specific questions or anything additional that you guys might like to add on to, or maybe discuss or debrief with Adam and myself, you can definitely either pick up the phone and give us a bit of a buzz, or just just kind of I guess maybe shoot us through an email through the portal. We are more than happy to discuss further information with regards to these units. So what I'll probably do now is I'll probably just end the recording, and then if anybody's got any questions, you are more than welcome to pop them in the chat box, or
Thanks, guys.
just ask.